Welcome for several reasons. Welcome in that I'm glad you made it, and welcome in my extension to you here that I would really like for you to be able to take in what I have to share. I hope it will be helpful. If it isn't, I hope you will discard it as you leave the call, but I think you will find it helpful. It's at the heart of what causes a great deal of our suffering. And I'm referring to the inner dialogue. We might not think of it in terms of actual sentences, although there are times where we really are saying full sentences or paragraphs, maybe even volumes, in our mind to ourselves, perhaps thinking or imagining that we're actually having that dialogue with somebody else who's, not even here. And that is seemingly the usual state of mind. That divided attention at best between where our body actually is and what is actually happening in the moment around us, while part of our attention, or maybe a great deal of our attention, is inwardly focused on a narrative of some sort. Either it's an explicit narrative that comes in the form of words and sentences and things we're saying to ourselves or saying to imaginary people in our head, or it's a more subtle and implicit narrative. One can walk around with a general sense that is born of how we're feeling, actually, with what our emotions are in the current moment. So we can, if our emotions tend to be in a given moment shifting toward the negative or unpleasant experiences, that creates a general sense that sometimes we can walk around the world with, and we can walk around in our life with this negative filter that's born of this feeling state that is born of often this inner dialogue, right? As far as which came first, chicken or egg, does the unpleasant feeling state come first? Does the storyline come first? How many angels dance on the head of a pin? I think it could go either way. But since it is a cycle, that this inner narrative generates a way of feeling in the moment, we can hop into that cycle and make adjustments anywhere along the way. So we can make adjustments in where our attention is. We can make adjustments in how much attention we give to the narrative. We can make adjustments in how much attention we give to our body state. We can give attention to what our next action is going to be. So we actually have more choice, more than it often feels like. And so I decided to bring in the topic of entering this cycle at the point of the internal narrative, at the internal dialogue. And take a moment. I bet this isn't brand spanking new information for you, and yet it may be useful right now in this moment to pause, to notice where has your attention been let's say in the last hour. When you think of the options here, there could be attention on the actual moment that you are in, meaning, what you see, what you feel, what you hear, what you touch, what you taste, what you smell. In the last hour, your attention could also have been on some feeling state or feeling states that came and went, whether that's a awareness of hunger, awareness of tension, awareness of open heart, connection with someone. And maybe at some point in the last hour, your attention has been even momentarily in some internal conversation with yourself or with some other imaginary person. Now, the quality and the tone of our conversations with one another has a lot to do with how we both walk away from that interaction feeling. The quality of the message, that is the relative positivity or negativity of our words, of our bodily expression of the communication, has a big impact on how we walk away from each other feeling about that interaction, right? As it turns out, and it's easy to forget, we have the same impact on ourselves when we are the only participant in this dialogue. The quality of the message, the tone of the words, the way our body's expressing that, it's really quite a lot like somebody else was standing there saying it to us. I don't know about you, but when I get into a really negative space with my self-talk, I would be deeply offended if anybody else talked to me that way, right? It would be really unpleasant. So starting to pay attention in this way is a form of self-compassion, that is noticing how it is that you are addressing yourself, even if you think that in your head you're addressing that other imaginary person. Actually, you're the only one there, so you are on the receiving end of that as well. And it will have an effect. And you'll suffer if the tone of the message and the content of that message is distorted, for instance, by leaving things out or by over-focusing on some things and disregarding other things. So you will suffer if you're, to the extent that this inner dialogue is based on a combination of truth and missing information at best. And at worst, it can be a wholly inaccurate portrayal of the present moment based on some past experience perhaps you had. In other words, that inner dialogue is often retrieving things from our past, whether it's 5 minutes past or 50 years past. So when we're not paying actual attention to what this dialogue is, when we're kind of on autopilot with it, and we're in any kind of unpleasant physical state anyway, we have this peculiar feature of our cognitive processing system, that our mind is more likely to draw memories that are consistent with our present physical state. It will selectively attend to those things from our inner world that agree, that are consistent with what's happening in our body right then. To the extent that we're more aware of this inner process, we get to have a lot more input and intention about what we entertain in this inner chat. So my invitation to you is to, again, looking back into this past hour, and just seeing whether or not how it fits or how it doesn't fit your experience here. That is, has your mind been selectively attending to some pieces of information and inadvertently leaving out others? So that's one kind of distortion, is this mood or state-dependent memory retrieval. We have this momentary state filter, right? Selectively pulling things that tend to agree with it. And another kind of distortion is really bad wrapping the self, is critical, under the guise of trying to be helpful, pointing out all the things you could do differently or should have done differently or might do differently. And so that's another kind of distortion. It's focusing on the negatives and sometimes even flat out distorting your opinion of yourself. And of course, or your opinion of someone else. So there can be a negative bias to the tone of the message, to the type of words used. Some people even struggle with a really pretty harmful or cruelty to the self. They don't mean to. It's just become a habit. And habits can be changed, but it takes an awareness of it to be able to start to make a choice to do something differently, as we would in having a conversation with one another, right? If I come off a little hot-headed and I say things in a way that will hurt a little terse to make my point, I'll have to walk away from that interaction and go, there's a reason why I don't feel entirely comfortable with that. So in the same way, we can take a look at the consequences on our bodily state of where our mind has just been and consider, is there a different way of speaking to myself about this matter that honors the truth of what I'm trying to say, but takes some responsibility and accountability for what the consequences to myself are going to be. I don't want to cause myself suffering, but if I am, I want to take a look at that. I don't want to cause harm to anybody, and I'm included in that group. So my encouragement is to you to take the next 10, 15 minutes. I'm going to end the call a little earlier today just to give you time. 10 or 15 minutes that you didn't think you had to pay attention to yourself. You can pay attention to the moment in which you're sitting, or give your attention, I should say. Nobody's charging you. It's not a payment. You can give your attention to the present moment that surrounds you, and that is your current environment. You can give your attention also to your current bodily state, including any emotional residue that might have followed you into this moment. You might give your attention to what the inner dialogue of the moment is. What's the tone of the message? Is there a way of communicating within your own mind that's truthful and respectful? That's humbled a bit by the fact that we often don't have all the information, and maybe we need some more information before we can really make that judgment. And if you choose, you can also give your attention to what you see as the very next action that you wish to take. And my hope is that whatever you choose to give your attention to, that you notice it. You notice where you're giving your attention. And what's the quality of that attention? Are there any unintended messages, languaging, posturing, or stance that is internally created? You can start to make different choices about that once you see it. In fact, sometimes once you see it, different choices just seem to automatically happen. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope it's at least given you some things to chew on. And if it doesn't suit you, do please feel free to discard and do whatever else you'd rather do with the next 10 or 15 minutes for yourself, taking care of yourself, giving to yourself. Again, my name is Holly Anton. I'm an integrative psychologist here at the Institute for Health and Healing in Santa Rosa. Take care, and until next time, may you have some peace.